At what point did $500,000 stop feeling like a fortune and start feeling like the entry price for a normal life? If you walk through any suburban neighborhood in the United States or a decent outskirts district in Western Europe today, in January of 2026, you're looking at rows of $500,000 assets. To the outside world, these houses represent the peak of middle-class stability. They are the stage for the American dream or the European standard. But if you could peel back the roofs and look at the spreadsheets inside, you'd see a very different story. You'd see people who earn six figures but feel like they're drowning in a shallow pool. Today, we're going to look at the brutal math of the $500,000 house. Not the math your real estate agent shows you, and certainly not the math the bank uses to pre-qualify you. We're going to look at the actual, cold numbers that determine whether you own your home or whether your home owns you. Let's look at a typical couple. We'll call them Mark and Sarah. They're 30, living in a mid-sized American city, maybe Charlotte or Phoenix, or perhaps a bustling European hub like Manchester or Lyon. Together, they earn $120,000 a year. On paper, they are the ultimate success story. They've worked hard, avoided major debt, and through disciplined saving, they've scraped together a 10% down payment, $50,000. They've been told their whole lives that buying a home is a smart move, the only way to build real wealth and stop throwing money away on rent. So they find a nice three-bedroom house listed at $500,000. In their heads, the math is simple. $500,000 minus their $50,000 deposit leaves a $450,000 mortgage. At 2020's excess average interest rates, which have stubbornly held around 6.2%, their monthly principal and interest is roughly $2,750. They look at their $7,500 monthly take-home pay after tax and think, we can afford that. It's barely 37% of our income. It'll be tight, but we'll grow into it. But this is where the system begins to win, and the homeowner begins to lose. What Mark and Sarah, and perhaps you, often overlook is that the bank's mortgage payment is only the cover charge to enter the club. The bank only cares about the principal and the interest, but you have to live in the house. First, let's talk about the true monthly burn. In most desirable areas in 2026, property taxes on a $500,000 home aren't a minor detail. They will run you about $500 to $600 a month. Then there is homeowners insurance. Climate concerns and rising reconstruction costs have caused premiums to surge nearly 50% in the last few years. That adds another $250. And because they only put 10% down, the bank hits them with private mortgage insurance, PMI. That's another $150 a month for the privilege of the bank taking a risk on them. Suddenly, that $2,750 payment is actually $3,750. But we aren't done. Now let's look at the hidden cost that nobody likes to talk about because it's not a monthly bill until it is. Maintenance. The fundamental rule of homeownership is the 1% rule. You should expect to spend 1% of the home's value per year on maintenance. On a $500,000 house, that's $5,000 a year or $415 a month, just to keep the house in its current condition. This isn't for renovations. This is for the water heater that explodes in January, the roof leak that appears after a storm, or the HVAC system that decides to quit on the hottest day of July. Our couple is now at $4,165 per month just to exist in the house. That is 55% of their take-home pay. But a house doesn't exist in a vacuum. A $500,000 house usually requires a certain lifestyle to match the neighborhood. You don't park a 15-year-old rusted sedan in the driveway of a $500,000 home. Not because you're shallow, but because the psychological pressure to fit the frame is immense. In 2026, the car market hasn't stayed still. Mark and Sarah have two modest SUVs, standard middle-class vehicles. Between the financing, insurance, and fuel, they're spending $1,400 a month on transportation. Then come the invisible drains. Utilities. Heating and cooling a $500,000 home isn't like an apartment. Modern energy prices are volatile. Budget $400. Student loans. They're still paying $500 a month for the degrees that got them that $120,000 salary. Groceries in life. Simple existence. Food, a phone plan, basic internet. Costs $1,000. Let's do the final tally. Housing for $1,165. Debt and transport, $1,900. Living essentials, $1,400. Total, $7,465. They earn $7,500. They are spending $7,465. Mark and Sarah aren't poor. By global standards, they are the elite, but they are one car repair, one medical bill, or one reduced hours memo away from total financial collapse. They are living in a $500,000 prison with very nice curtains. Why do intelligent people walk into this trap so willingly? Why do we ignore the math until the papers are signed? It's because of a psychological phenomenon called lifestyle anchoring. We don't compare our lives to our bank statements. We compare our lives to our peers. If everyone in your social circle has a $500,000 house and a specific brand of coffee on their counter, your brain signals that this is a baseline for safety. To do anything less feels like a failure. We also suffer from the asset illusion. We tell ourselves that the house is an investment. We say, I'm building equity. But let's look at the 30-year reality. If Mark and Sarah stay in that house for the full term of the mortgage, they won't have paid $500,000. Between the interest, $600,000 plus dollars, property taxes, $200,000, and maintenance, $150,000, they will have paid closer to $1.4 million for that asset. For a house to be a good investment, in that scenario, it doesn't just need to hold its value. It needs to nearly triple just for them to break even on the carrying costs. The system is designed to make you feel like you're building equity, while it actually harvests your most productive years through interest, fees, and taxes. You aren't the owner. You are the caretaker for the bank's asset. So, who can actually afford a $500,000 house in 2026? The answer isn't a specific salary. It's a specific ratio. Financially intelligent people, the ones who stay calm during market crashes and job losses, don't buy what the bank says they can afford. The bank uses your gross income before taxes to calculate affordability. This is a trap. You don't live on your gross income. You live on what hits your bank account. The truly wealthy buy based on the 25% rule. They ensure their total housing cost, everything included, is no more than 25% to 30% of their take-home pay. For a $500,000 house with a $4,100 monthly carry, you shouldn't be earning $120,000. You should be earning closer to $180,000 to $200,000. If you don't earn that, the rational person does something deeply uncomfortable in our society. They wait, or they buy a $300,000 house and accept that it isn't their dream home. They prioritize their freedom over their square footage. They understand that the goal of a home is to provide shelter and peace of mind. But if the cost of that shelter destroys your peace of mind, it's no longer a home. It's a liability disguised as a trophy. The math is brutal because the math doesn't have an ego. It doesn't care about the neighborhood you want to live in, the school district you feel you need, or the pride of ownership you've been promised by marketing campaigns. In 2026, the real wealth isn't the person with the biggest mortgage or the newest kitchen. It's the person with the biggest margin. The person living in a $300,000 house with $2,000 a month in leftover cash is infinitely wealthier and more powerful than the person in the $500,000 house living paycheck to paycheck. The first person has options. They can invest, they can travel, they can quit a job they hate. The second person is a servant to their debt. They are tied to their desk because the house demands to be fed every 30 days. Before you sign that 30-year contract, I want you to look past the staging and the fresh paint. Look at the numbers. Ask yourself, are you buying a future? Or are you just buying a very expensive set of walls to feel like you've arrived? Because in the end, the most expensive thing you can buy is a life you can't afford. If this perspective helped you see the numbers a bit more clearly today, you might find our other deep dives into the psychology of money useful. Feel free to subscribe. Until next time,